All right, everybody, let's get started. This is the Kubernetes Office Hours, third Wednesday of every month. This is our live stream where we take your live questions from Slack and from wherever, and we answer them live on the air with our panel of experts, which you should see above here on the video. So before we start, experts, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Bob Killen. I'm with Advanced Research Computing and Technology Services here at the University of Michigan. Sort of my area of expertise is Kubernetes on bare metal and all the crazy stuff that comes with it, different networking and all that other fun stuff, along with Kubernetes Federation.
Hi guys, I am Mario Loria. I also love doing Kubernetes on bare metal and now on AWS and Google Cloud, especially in the realm of e-commerce and moving very fast with developers that love to push code into production with one command. And I work at StockX in Detroit, Michigan.
Hi, my name is Ralph Bankston. I'm a customer reliability engineer here at Heptio, and I work on helping folks solve their problems in the cloud on bare metal and pretty much where they have problems.
Hi, I'm Carlisia. I work at Heptio as a software developer, and I work on the ARC team, which does backup and disaster recovery, and I'm developing expertise in that area. So there. It's my first time doing this.
It's her first time. Yay.
My first time.
Yay. Hi, my name is Jeffrey Sika. I also work with Bob at ArcTS at the University of Michigan. My areas of expertise are the UI dashboard and the jobs API and batch jobs.
Sweet. And I'm George Castro, and I work at Heptio as a community manager, and I'll be your host today, basically reading all your questions. So before we start, some quick ground rules for everybody. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you. You can subscribe, and we do these every Wednesday, the third Wednesday of every month. And someone will toss the URL, actually the URL with everything you need to know to participate in the show is always in the topic in Office Hours and in Kubernetes-users on Slack. So the ground rules, judgment-free zone. If somebody asks a question that you feel is like too easy or whatever, we all have to start from somewhere. So let's make sure that we have a supportive environment for new users, and remember that the code of conduct is always in effect. While we will do our best to answer your questions, we also don't have SSH access to your cluster, nor your network team or things like that. So there's only so much we could do with that. So if you're having like a really specific problem, usually we'll try to help by trying to point you in at least the right direction of where to look to get the help that you need. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers based on your experience and your pro tips. So if someone says, where do I find the logs to the node? Yeah, they're located here, but add some tidbit or something like that, or some kind of insight on logging, for example. So we could usually do that. And the audience helps us out by pasting in URLs to Kubernetes documentation, blog posts, any tips or tricks that you see on the internet. Feel free to plop them in the #Office Hours Slack channel. At the end, we take all these cool URLs that we have and publish them in the show notes so that people have them for reference when they're watching the videos. So if at any time you feel you can help someone and you're just hanging out in the Slack channel, feel free to just start dropping URLs in there. And you can just post your questions in the Slack channel. If we get to them, if we start reading questions and it looks like we skipped yours, feel free to repeat it. Usually question in all caps, colon, is an easier way for me to find it. But generally speaking, we take all the questions that are posted in the channel between our last session and this session and try to read through them all. So if I don't get to you, I apologize. So just be loud and squeaky on Slack, and we will get to you as we have. And if we do read live on the air and address it, you'll automatically be entered in the Kubernetes t-shirt drawing, in which we never actually wear the t-shirt that you could win, but these are official Kubernetes t-shirts. I put images of them in the Slack channel there. So what happens is at the end, we'll toss all your names in a little script, get a random winner, and then I will PM you after this if you've won, and then get you the t-shirt code that you need for the CNCF store, but you got to stick by to the end to win. See, that's how we get you to remain sticky. So with that, are we ready to begin? Panelists, you ready? Okay,
so.
awesome. Audience, you can help us out by posting your questions in the Slack channel. We have a few queued up already. If someone in Hash Office Hours sees people struggling in Kubernetes users, by all means, bring them on over, toss the link to them so they can listen along, and then we will get started. So this first one here, I'm just going to look at the notes and read them. Dylan, is that who we're going with first? Dylan's question? Everyone seems
Yep.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. Question, in a 2-container pod, how can I pull a new image on one container without restarting the other? I previously manually rebooted one container and it pulled the latest, but apparently latest is frowned upon. Yes, it is, as well as manual reboots. I don't want to reboot the other container because it does a lot of API calls on boot, and kubectl apply would do that. Actually, no, it seems to not even be updating on container reboot, and I'm not sure why. Container policy is latest, and latest Docker image is tagged appropriately in my AWS repo. What do we think about this one?
I can start.
Yeah.
Usually if you have a multi-container pod with different times that they would be updated, it's going to be easier in the long run to separate out those dependencies. So if you restart an application and an application dependency at the same time for a new version of that application, those should be multi-container. If you have something that makes it so that they have different times that you'd restart them, it's a lot easier to just separate them out.
Sure. So let me just ask the panel, because we were talking about this before the session started. When do I know whether something should be multiple containers in one pod, or like how do I know where I draw the line into this needs to be a separate pod?
Okay. He actually had a quick follow-up bit to that too.
Sure. Go ahead and just fill it in, Bob.
Okay. They are together because they both connect to the same storage, same PVC.
Okay.
Depending on what you're doing, and the restrictions of the PVC, they can be mounted by multiple pods.
Yeah, it sounds like he kind of lumped them together. Maybe instead of thinking what the value is that was provided out of that pod, he lumped them together based on they have this similar function. Mm-hmm. And my question is, like, do they talk to each other? Do they depend on each other? What's kind of the relationship between these two things? And I think there's more discussion on this. I know George has something to say on it, but like, how do we think about what a pod should be and what containers exist? Well, the containers that exist are what work to provide the application that provides whatever value that pod is providing, whether it's some web application or some database or whatever it is, right? And so multiple containers might be needed to provide that value. And it could be some web app that has something that's checking for, like, that runs backups for it every night or something, but that runs alongside it. And then maybe an Nginx container as well. Those three containers are in the pod, and the value is provided from the proxying from Nginx to the application, and then that is what the pod serves out via service, et cetera, right? So,
and then he follows up. By the way, if you have follow-up information, feel free to just continue to post it in the channel, and we'll figure it all out. He goes, I was under the assumption the two pods couldn't simultaneously collect to a PVC. And Bob, you have some comments here on this.
Yeah, it really depends on what your persistent volume actually supports. There's 3 different modes: read-only, read-write, and read-write once and read-write many. Read-write once usually means one can own it and multiple things can read it. It's actually possible to support like multiple types at the same time before I go down that path. So you could have it something mounted as read-only and other mounted as read-write. There's a whole slew of different things you can do in that space.
Okay, and then I did want to say something where I had a tip from a coworker that I asked where the line was, and he was like, do the two things have the same life cycle? Then if yes, they could be in the same pod. If not, split them out. Can we talk about this a little bit? Because we know that the pod is the smallest unit in Kubernetes, right? So can one of you kind of give me the lay of the land as far as that goes?
Yeah, so I mean, just kind of going on what I said, like the pod is the smallest unit of understanding. So like that pod has to provide the value of what your application is, right? And so, you know, when you create a deployment, let's say you create effectively your application, the value that that provides, whatever that is supposed to be. And so generally that's one pod with one or more containers. And so that's why that's kind of a domain for the service, right? What are all the things that that service needs to run? And they should be in, and I think the life cycle is a key word here because, you know, what does life cycle mean? If the application isn't running, then its backups are irrelevant, right? So maybe its backups run, you know, a container that manages its backups would run in that same container, right? Likewise, sidecar containers, like something like Envoy. Envoy doesn't need to be running for that app if that app isn't running, right? So you know it's dependent on that app working and providing the value that you expect of it, and that's I think kind of how you can think about life cycle and what's being provided in that pod, right? And the thing with a pod being that smallest resource at a Kubernetes level is you have to make sure everything's in there that your app needs, right? And is effective for things to run. So that's kind of how I think about it. There's far better phrases and blog posts about how to think about it as well, but yeah, that's my TLDR.
Yep, and Dylan adds, yeah, one of them the only one right, so this should work to split up the pod. So it sounds like you got a twofer there, you got a best practice, and that should automatically solve your previous problem. So thanks, Dylan, for the question. Feel free to stick around, ask follow-ups if you have if anybody has any other broken stuff, feel free to start queuing up your questions or anything that we could clear up for you. Moving on, our Dilip83 asks, hi, I'm fairly new to Kubernetes, so part of my new question, no worries. Is there a way to run multiple containers in a daemon set? If not, I understand I can run multiple containers in a pod, but how do I specify that the pod has to run on every node? Daemon set encapsulates that and does auto scaling and spins up pods when the cluster scales, etc., etc.
Okay, well, you're in luck. All the workloads within Kubernetes, so your replica set, deployments, daemon sets, everything, all include a template. And that template is actually a pod template. Anything that you can do in a pod can actually just be included in there. You can, it makes it like, it makes it incredibly simple just to extend the basic concepts across all of the Kubernetes resources.
All right, let us know if you want to follow up to that question. Moving on, Marcelo Feitosa Parisi, hope I got that right, asks, when should you consider using an API gateway versus ingress? Can an API gateway be considered an ingress by itself?
So, I mean, an API gateway would be something that you would host within Kubernetes, and ingress would still have to point to it, correct?
Yeah, I'm a little hairy on like what they mean by API gateway.
Because I mean, like
Envoy.
Ooh, maybe.
Because that can technically handle both.
Marcelo, if you're listening, please clarify, because that kind of depends on.
He is typing.
Yeah.
Ambassador or Envoy, for example. Remember, for the video, we should read when people type more stuff also.
Okay.
So we have that.
I guess it really just depends on your application and if you can really, take advantage of the features in there. I know there's a lot of stuff that people can do with rate limiting and circuit breaking, but if you and your application architecture aren't really using those yet, I would say there isn't really a good reason to look at them, at least at the moment. It's definitely a worthwhile venture, like long term. But if it's a what you got right now versus going with that, there are trade-offs there.
All right. Any other comments on this? Ingress versus API gateway. Rolf, you look like you had something to say, but then you don't, or you're thinking pretty hard.
I was actually thinking pretty hard of a use case. The biggest one would be if you're only ever going to be using it as an actual API endpoint versus if you need feature-rich HTTP portions that you'd get from Nginx or a traditional ingress.
Yeah, Marcelo adds, I've been using Ambassador plus Istio for everything as it helps with JWT, rate limiting, etc. While I figure Nginx would not bring me those advantages.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
All right. So yeah, if you have any follow-up questions to that, please let us know. Joel Davis asks, is there any sort of online reference for implementing particular services in Kubernetes? Just as an example, I could set up a Galera cluster hosted on Kubernetes, but I'd like to see what the right way is to do it might be. I realize it'll vary depending on what they're trying to do, but I'm just looking for something to look to base my stuff on.
Is this a Helm charts possibly solve his problem?
Maybe.
I don't know exactly what he wants. I mean, for me, when I look at, I want to deploy GitLab, right? VCS system that can do 18 other things by now, auto DevOps and its own container registry. It's a dense system, right? Like it has its own storage, it has a database and all of these things. I look for the public Helm charts repo. Someone has gone through this, GitLab themselves have said they have an official repo in there, and I look at how they deploy things. So I like to get kind of down and dirty with those things. So the Helm charts really can help you dive in and see all the configuration options, especially the ones that matter, which are usually the ones that are in the main config file. That would be how I look at it. The other way that you can also is, and this is a little bit more not sketchy, but a little lower level, is the Docker Hub. Depending on the application, it's guaranteed to have, I've run like traceroute, a container for traceroute before, like just that one utility that exists on the Docker Hub, but other utilities as well exist there, and you can kind of look at how they're structured by just looking at their Docker file. So that's kind of how I would very quickly start to approach that problem and understanding the app and its needs.
So I have a follow-up question for you there that you just reminded me, Mario. So let's say let's say you do find a Galera chart and you base off of it. How do you then maintain your version with the changes? Because obviously the upstream Helm chart's going to get fixes and updates and stuff, but then you probably have your own stuff that's local to you that only you care about. How do you handle that kind of?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is the question everyone's asking themselves right now as we approach package management going into the future for Kubernetes, and why we have customized Kubicorn and 18 other solutions that have cropped up, is how do I maintain that release? And the key thing here for me is what I do, and this is a little dirty, but if the chart provides the value that I see that I can get by just editing the main config file and that's it, and not the actual template files, then I still clone it locally to my namespace for my company or whatever private namespaces, and then I will just launch it there. But I know it's a point in time, right? I know I've cloned it. I know it's not going to change. Changes upstream are a little hairy in the Helm world, because when a new version comes out, it requires new templating. And that new templating could not really work for an older version of the application that you're running. So you either have to move with them or move at your own pace. And almost everyone's going to need to move at their own pace, or there's going to be breakage. And so this is a big thing. So I always clone to my own, and then I will, every so often when we're looking at the app again, or we're ready to upgrade, right? And really, I like it from the business sense of like, okay, we're ready to upgrade the GitLab to the next version, because that's generally like we have a need, or there's a security vulnerability or whatever it is. Then that kicks off the manual process of me or other engineers looking and saying, okay, what are upgrades upstream of how we would deploy this new version as well, right? And you can manage your own tags, your own build process, all of that around it as well. So that's how I approach it. Now, I'm guessing a lot of people do that. Others probably don't care and just pull it. I'd like to hear more on this, and I would love to get into this discussion, especially at KubeCon with a lot of you guys, of how people are approaching these problems. So I'll stop talking now.
Anybody else doing this or have recommendations for Joel? Okay, Joel, let us know if that answers your question, and feel free to post a follow-up. Thanks for showing up. Next, we have T. Becker asks, I have a small Kubernetes 1.7.5 cluster running on bare metal set up by kubeadmin. My cert's expired. I have been meaning to migrate the workload to a fresh cluster anyway. How easy is it to refresh the certs? Should I just move up my upgrade window? This is a great question.
I would personally just move up your update window. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Ralph, you're a bare metal kubeadmin person.
Yeah, I would. I was trying to figure out which version. Cert's got some major overhauls inside of kubeadmin recently, but that process is kind of hairy, if I remember correctly, from 1.7.5. So I just go ahead and upgrade quickly to a new cluster and move those workloads.
So he chimes in saying the cert overhaul was in 1.8. You're muted, George.
Yeah, the question I was having to myself is if he moves over to the newest version of kubeadmin, does he get the nice cert management stuff?
You mean if he upgrades kubeadmin, will it actually upgrade the certs for him?
Well, no, what I'm saying is like, let's say he gets his new cluster and then he's on 1.11 dot whatever number we're on.
2.
Yeah. Does modern kubeadmin handle certificate expiration a lot more gracefully than this, right? Basically, it's like, okay, it'll suck this first time, but from then on, I'll have a new enough kubeadmin that when this happens again, I'm not stuck in this position.
+1
is what I'm guessing, but I don't know offhand how kubeadmin is doing cert stuff lately.
T. Becker commented in comment that the cert's overhaul was in 1.8.
Yeah.
In 1.8 and above, cert management is much nicer than in older versions of kubeadmin.
Yeah.
I definitely think just, upgrading now is your best bet.
Especially if you're a 1.7.5, that's kind of hairy. Yeah, that seems like it's going to be the best bet. And T. Becker, if you have any feedback for the kubeadmin team, they are pretty responsive. So I definitely would like to hear how this kind of works out for you after that. Refreshing the certs, I think, in modern kubeadmin. That should be something we follow up on. Sometimes we do have a kubeadmin person on, but we do not today. Ralph, you're the best kubeadmin person I have right now. So, okay, any other follow-up? Looks like Marcelo is typing something. We'll move
Dylan
on.
had a follow-up.
Yep, Dylan has a follow-up. Dylan asks, if I have a pod that is only running a Redis deployment, should I reboot or run some other maintenance on it occasionally?
I'm looking at you, Jeff.
So, I mean, I personally run into instances where you just have to make sure you're running something in HA and then cycle through them gracefully, because there are instances where the container gets into just a bad state and you have to literally recreate it, and then everything is all gravy after that. But that's
the host dies.
Yeah, or the host dies. But yeah.
What Redis is actually holding and how you're using it.
Yeah.
You can either use it as like an actual data store or an in-memory
key value store.
Yeah.
They really try and push you towards just using it in memory.
Yeah. So Dylan asked H8, and you meant HA as in high availability. So let me expand this question a little bit. Let's talk about applications that might not behave correctly. Like, what best practices do we have here as far as spreading this load? This is like, Kubernetes is really good at this kind of thing.
So what do you really want? Like, you just kind of said, let's talk about applications. Yeah, so
I do more than one container.
If he needs to reboot the container every once in a while, how would he set it up so that?
Oh, I see. So go ahead, Bob.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, like, where a stateful set or something like that is great. When you have to have a cluster of items, the stateful set will give everything an ordinal. And when you update it, do any maintenance to it, it will cycle through them one by one and handle it. The other thing is, like, I believe there's a Redis operator that will actually handle the HA aspects for you, so that way it will deploy more than one Redis instance and handle the health checking and lifecycle of them all. So if you do have to upgrade or do whatever, it will do all that gracefully in your cluster automatically for you.
So in short, use an operator if you can, and there's one available and it's stable. Otherwise, yeah, like I was thinking Skunkworks, you're running HA Redis on your own and it's in a stateful set, and you have a cron job that like every 3 days kicks one of them in the head, you know?
Chaos engineering.
It is chaos engineering for making things better. Uh-oh, George is gone. George has left the building. Gone but not forgotten.
Sorry, what I missed? Did you explain HA and everything, Jeff, while I was gone?
Not necessarily. We talked about the fact that operators are probably a good thing when it comes to setting things up HA. If not, I gave an example of a Skunkworks way to do what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, and I see some more follow-up questions on the channel. And I'm just going to read them. So Marcelo's back with, I got another one on kubeadmin. I've got a cluster with some bare metal installed with kubeadmin. The boxes have 2 NICs, one that connects to my public network and the other connects to the internal cluster network. When I've installed it, I've used the IP from the internal interface as the administration interface. So now if I get the kubeconfig and try to use it against the public IP, I get into SSL errors and need to use kubectl with the insecure skip TLS verify flag. Is it possible to add the public IP to the interface?
Yeah, you can add additional like IPs and DNS names to the SAN in your kubeconfig when you're deploying all that stuff.
Okay. Do we have a link to the docs?
Give me a sec to pull up a config.
Sure. Great question, Marcelo. Moving back to Dylan, let's see. I have 1 pod running Redis server and like 400 worker pods leasing from it, like in the docs. Or should I have multiple pods acting as servers?
Multiple pods.
Yeah, specifically, it's multiple pods working in HA as a service together. Like, not just making sure we're clear. Like, you could certainly have like 5 different pods, but they would be acting independently. Make sure that it is running in an HA setup. Yes, thumbs up.
Yes.
I think you and I were thinking the same thing. Uh-oh.
All right, Dylan, let me know if that makes sense for you. Joel asks, I asked on Kubernetes users. Okay, after this, I'm going to go back to Kubernetes users. And
I have to move his question up now.
Okay, yeah. I asked on Kubernetes users, but I thought I'd just ask, what are some of the difference between managed Kubernetes like GKE and deploying clusters via COPS? What are some of the things you can do with COPS deployed clusters that you'll likely be locked out on a managed Kubernetes? This is a great question. So what's the difference basically between using a managed Kubernetes or just using a tool to set up my own cluster manually, or with a tool like COPS or KubeSpray or Kubicorn or kubeadmin?
So go ahead, bro.
I was just going to say the biggest one is access to the masters. A lot of the config flags for the API servers and some of those things aren't necessarily exposed for managed Kubernetes offerings. That's the biggest one. Of if you have compliance issues where you need certain audit flags enabled, it can get kind of hairy to force those through the managed offerings.
You said the magic word of compliance.
Yes. And I've got another big one would be upgrades, right? So if you set up your own cluster using any of those other tools, upgrades are kind of your responsibility at that point. Whereas with managed ones like GKE, it's pretty much transparent to you. It's a few weeks usually after an upstream release, if that. I mean, depending on whether it's a major release or.
Yeah, GKE is like a week, and they've got it pushed, and like you don't know that it's pushed because it's just magic, right? Like, I mean, that's cloud semantics, and like I think everyone's kind of in the same agreement. Like the cloud is doing a lot for you behind the scenes, and I think when you get down to the brass tacks with like kubeadm is really sitting there trying to emulate a lot of those features in terms of bootstrapping your bare metal cluster that
Mhm.
cops and other things are doing for you already in cloud that you get with cloud. And a lot of it is dealing less with the host, right? You don't care as much about that operating system and that core like host setup, its MAC address, that stuff's just all abstracted away from you. It's more just deployed, set up my certs, access, etc. And a lot of that's just behind the scenes. So those would be the key things. I would definitely look at the docs for like the quick start docs for like kube admin versus cops, and that would give you a good sense as well. So
Yeah, I think you definitely get a lot more control with the other tools for sure. I have to run this version of this OS, or you know, you do get the flexibility then, right? You know, depending on what you want. So hopefully, Joel, that will get you some tips there. Feel free to ask some follow-up questions on that. Okay, moving on. Let's see. Elon from Kubernetes users asks, I'm having some difficulty doing a kubectl patch for node selector, and then a bunch of text. Okay,
I'll paste the text in.
yeah. No idea what's going on here.
Yeah, to be honest, I have no idea without looking at like the rest of the kit and config or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
are we looking at a command and checking his syntax? Because yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. You know, I'm surprised we don't have like a cube syntax.io site that like is just a simple page with like a text box that you can put your thing in. And it's like, nope, you're doing your JSON wrong, guys.
Yeah.
So
Well, I copied it. It is valid JSON. I copied it out and tossed it through like JSON.
okay.
So
yeah.
I don't know. I would have to look at the rest
Yep,
of the
no idea on that one. We're going to move on that one. Sorry, man. Matthew Peterson asks, hello, I'm having issues following Kubernetes the hard way, but using Azure. I am at the DNS step and I am getting failed to list star v1.service unauthorized and failed to list star v1.endpoints unauthorized in the pod logs for kubedns. I assume there's an issue with RBAC, but I can't seem to figure out how to troubleshoot. So where's Matthew going to look here to get?
Well, I'd take a look at the cluster role and cluster role binding that's configured as. It's probably started as like the default service account or something like that. The other thing is you can take a look and see if it does happen to have like the right cluster role binding, is make sure that it has like list and watch enabled for those resources and in the cluster role. Because that should be the only thing that kubedns actually requires to do its thing. Oh, and targeting for what was the two resources that were listed? It was service and endpoints.
Yep.
Other than that, it's like start going through the kubelet logs or anything else to try and figure out what's going on.
Any other tips for him here? Real quick before I get to this one, there was a question I wanted to repeat that we got this morning, which was really interesting. Thoughts on the CKA? Someone was preparing to take the CKA and asked for any studying tips or anything information with that. Ralph, Ralph, you took the CKA, didn't you? Yeah.
I am actually a CKA person.
Excellent.
The big one is the test. It's kind of unnerving to have a person staring at you. So that's definitely a weird experience. They're staring through your camera the entire time, asking you questions and some interesting things. The big one is going through and making sure you understand how the API server and all of those other pieces interact. Kubernetes the hard way is a good just getting started sort of item, and then walking through what's actually in the publicly provided curriculum to see what's there.
Mm-hmm.
And getting used to using kubectl extensively.
Mm-hmm. And anybody else who wasn't here this morning have opinions on the CKA? All right. New question in the channel. Ali asks, is there a way to inject environment variables from one container to another in the same pod? E.g., init container sets environment variables for the container in the pod.
So I have an idea on this one. If you write those environment variables to a file in like tempfs essentially, and then mount it and source that in whatever your init script is in the other container, that should be able to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be your best way, or you write some config map or something like that. But again, you could mount a config map that is just updated by the inner container, and then the main container takes that in when it launches. That would be probably your best way, because that keeps it abstracted away from just specificness inside the pod, but like it to like a config map, which is kind of outside and managed. So I actually was just loading the init containers page to see if there was like some way to pass information. I feel like there should be from one to another. I just don't know what that is. I have not done a ton with init containers. So
Yeah, I've only seen passing via the file system. You just
Yeah.
write a file to disk in a specific location and then load it back up either through a source command with whatever language you're using. And then if you're expecting it on login, to make sure that you're passing it to a proper, like a profile file, and then using a login prompt so that it actually gets sourced.
And then going back to Mario's suggestion, is there any reason that the environment variables would be like different for all the pods that are running in there? Like, is it a job that's going like fetching something and it's going to be different for every single one? If not, then a config map would definitely work out well.
Okay, we'll give Ali a chance to respond if he has any more information to add. In the meantime, let me kick over to Brian from Kubernetes Users asks, our framework apparently requires Minikube, and I have installed it, but it seems to spawn off insecure Kubernetes master nodes with the API service bound to a public IP listening on port 10250 that allows anyone to send commands to it. How do I change Minikube so that it only binds to localhost instead? Is that really default behavior?
It should bind to localhost. I guess it depends on which provider you're using. I'm really only familiar with like Hyper-V and VirtualBox.
Yep. And then someone put in the show notes here, I checked Minikube's documentation, but it says nothing on how to lock this down. Kubernetes also talk about specifying a param to the kubelet, but I'm unsure on how to do this in the context of Minikube. That is an interesting question.
I know you can hand Minikube pretty much just a kubeadm config now for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, yeah, I don't know.
I find that to be very odd default behavior, if that's indeed, or if it's just an issue.
I think it really does come down to what's their provider. Yeah. Also, I have a feeling the next question is going to spawn a fantastic conversation.
Okay. Meanwhile, Mario's giving Ali some examples here, and he says the use case for sharing environment variables between the containers that I'm exploring is secrets management with Vault. I've seen it done with temp storage, but was curious if it was possible to directly set the environment variable.
Well, so if you're using Vault, then what would happen is the application on start would ping Vault and request a temporary key to get access then to the data that you're letting get access to. I don't remember the exact semantics of how that works, but it's very, application starts up, requests what it needs, and then gets what it needs and continues on with its startup process and doing what it is meant to do. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like by having an init container in there, you just kind of add another layer of complexity and another step there. So it sounds like the core application itself should start up and then interface with Vault, however that's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Instead of passing it as an environment.
Instead of having something else that passes it. Yeah. Yep, correct.
So would that be a security issue then? If you're passing an environment variable from Vault to a variable to the application?
To an init container to the application?
Yeah.
Not exactly. I think it more just adds a complexity that you don't exactly need, because the init container is going to die after, right? So it's going to have one purpose, get that variable and then pass it on.
Gotcha.
And either way, like it's in the pod, right? Like it's, so.
Okay. So he has a follow-up with how about refreshing dynamic secrets with short TTLs? I think for that sort of thing, what you want to do is have the, what was it? Is it console template or whatever it is that can act as like PID1, and essentially it can listen into Vault for the changes and then change things out and send like a sig hop or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. So in your container, you're going to want an init process that basically can manage the reload call to the application when there's a change that needs to be applied. And I actually, you guys would know better than me. I don't know what the latest is on like when you change a secret in a volume, does that volume actually get updated in the pod? And then is there some way for Kubernetes to know, for us to tell Kubernetes, send a sig hop to the container?
So I don't think it'll send, I don't think it'll send a sig hop. But if you do like IO notify or something like that to reread it, you can do it that way.
Okay. And a lot of this might be like, maybe think about how your applications are architected and possibly like, is there a good case here for like new containers to just be spun up or a new pod to be spun up and replace the old one kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that you're not trying to change too much during a running, runtime. So,
yep. One other sort of usage pattern we see on this is like with the sidecar, where the sidecar is the thing with the secrets, and it can refresh it, it can do it, it can change it as much as we want, and then the container that you have that you care about is talking to it over like localhost, and essentially talking to it unencrypted, and then the other thing is just handling the rotation and all that.
Yeah, and one more thing on that point. Yeah, one more thing on that point. When you talk about sidecar, I think Envoy might be like, there might be, I just listened to a podcast around Istio from the Kubernetes podcast, which is fantastic. Everyone should check it out. And I think people are asking for features in Istio where it can also help manage the types of things that are being consumed by the application and telling the application when it should, sig up or reload or do something, right? That's managed, that's during runtime to decrease the need to kill it and spawn a fresh pod. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sidecar is a great idea as well. So
Ali's plopped an example on how it can be done, but using files that you want to look at. Mario, can you check that out while I read the next question, and we'll get back to you in a sec, Ali. Simon W asks, okay, so here's something I haven't gotten my head around yet. How do people keep track of configs of tools they've deployed to their clusters? A typical workflow might be git clone something, edit some variables, kubectl apply -f. Obviously, then it gets deployed. However, if I come back in a couple of months and want to upgrade to a new release, I'll need to have the same checkout available to update and then apply. Would you suggest adding another remote to the checkout, maybe a private repo, depending on what bars you configure, and then pushing it there? Then I can update the checkout from upstream whenever I need it. This seems related to the previous Helm style thing we were talking about. What about a non-Helm use case when people just have the YAML files?
Isn't there the Weave GitOps tool that does that? I'm blanking on what it's called. If Ilya were here, he could.
Yeah, I think it actually is just GitOps something. I will look that up. Wow.
I tend to just use
It is called GitOps.
Yeah, it literally is called GitOps.
You can apply an entire folder as well, just through pulling down a Git repo and then applying the entire thing.
Mm-hmm. So that seems to be a good answer to that question. Mario went ahead and plopped in the link to that Kubernetes podcast. And when there are new episodes, we do auto-ingest and announce those on discuss.kubernetes.io. So if you're always looking for new and cool things to subscribe to, check out discuss.kubernetes.io, which Mario's about to plop the URL to that. And then we have feeds of all the podcasts and cool things that are happening around the community. And you'll get a slick newsletter and all that good stuff. And Nick says, I quite like environment substitute plus raw Kubernetes manifests, which are simple at least. Okay, moving on. Big Willie asks, can you do FTP service a load balancer type? I've never thought I would get asked this question.
Yes. With the load balancer type, it's just, you doing TCP. So FTP is a TCP protocol. You should be able to do it. It's just making sure that the service is pointing to the right pod. I think that's like the only thing that they might get caught up with.
Yeah. I would be interested in seeing how someone's doing FTP Like if it's large with storage, and then you have the FTP server in a container, things like that. Too much, you think?
I think it could provide value depending on what you're trying to serve.
Yeah.
So I think so much storage now is very HTTP based, or it's very like GUI based, right? Or it's like download this application to your computer. But like there's some people like me that like our good old rsync, our good old SFTP, whatever it is. And like I think Kubernetes even still like provides value in like being able to make that easy, whether it's a node port or some other way to access it. You can still just run a container that does it. I actually have a anonymous FTP container I made a long time ago in my namespace on GitHub that I can post it. Literally, it's just anonymous FTP. You like mount the directory you want to serve, and you're good to go, right? Like just the classic old days of Doom, sharing Doom install files. So and WADs,
WADs, I was gonna say.
Yep.
Quick thing, doesn't for if you're gonna do that, don't you need to expose like a port range unless you're doing like passive FTP?
I was just kind of assuming technically.
So
passive FTP is the range.
Yeah, it's active FTP that you can do one port, and also you can do a singular port for that. I use SFTP or FTP ES, which is FTP over. So SFTP is SSH file transfer protocol, right? And then FTP ES is FTP over SSL TLS, effectively, right? Like so, you don't really want to use base FTP much anymore, but SFTP is kind of my go-to. So.
Port 21, I totally remembered that, and I'm right.
Yeah, so we should run an FTP server for Kubernetes.
Yes. All right, moving on. Ali's got another question. Keep them coming. These are great. Is it possible to encrypt all data in etcd by using wildcard for resources? The encrypt data docs, which is kubernetes.io/docs/task/administer cluster/encrypt data. Are there disadvantages of doing this? Let's look at that. Can I share my screen? I think I can do this.
This is a topic I would like to know a lot more about. I don't know much about. Oh, geez, nice. Does
that work? Can everyone see that?
Yeah,
that works.
Yeah.
Very cool. This would be a good discuss forum thread of like the best ways to encrypt etcd and do it effectively.
I didn't even know this was a thing. I mean, I knew etcd supported this, but
etcd is this done from Kubernetes API server. So have a cert with your API server that's going to encrypt and send the data to etcd. So in etcd, your data is written encrypted, and so that way nobody else who has access directly to etcd-ctl can actually access your Kubernetes secrets. So if they use etcd-ctl and get the data, they get all encrypted.
Okay, you broke up a lot during that, but hi, Dewal. It's so we do have some answers there.
Yeah,
this will be a great follow-up, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think what you were saying is something about like the API server talks to etcd completely encrypted, right? And like etcd does the encryption, then server side
No, I think what I was saying was Kubernetes API server encrypts the data and sends it to etcd, so that anybody who has access to etcd-ctl cannot actually see the data inside etcd.
Okay, so it's done at the API server layer, and then etcd just knows its data that goes inside of it and gets stored in it, and that's it. Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty primo.
The benefit is that nobody who has access to your etcd can actually access the data inside etcd, because API server is the only one which has the cert or the key for decrypting. Yeah.
Nice.
Are there any performance implications here? I'm thinking as etcd gets busy.
Well, you're encrypting, so yes, there would be, but you want to encrypt anyways. So whoever encrypts it, that should be okay.
Okay. I'm just wondering if it's like a huge hit or if it's a...
I doubt it's a huge hit these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people use Vault instead of directly letting API server encrypt. So you can use Vault in the middle and let Vault manage and host the secret. So etcd might, or host the key for the encryption.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, but there is performance, but I don't think it's as big as because you don't actually go to etcd as often. And only API server goes to it. So.
Okay, excellent. So, DeWalt, can you introduce yourself for the listeners?
Oh, hi guys. I'm Dawal. I'm I work for VMware. I'm working on some of the. I mean, I'm getting back into joining all the SIGs and working here and there. And I thought this meetup was great. Since you guys answer a lot of good questions, I would learn something new.
Yeah, I agree. That's the only reason I do this. I don't know anything, so I just hang out and learn. All right. Next question comes from Aravind from Kubernetes users. Hi, everyone. I'm implementing Spot Fleet for certain time every day to meet demands. Once the Spot Fleet terminates by the time specified, all the pods on these services take some time to migrate to new nodes. Is there a way to gracefully drain a Spot Fleet?
I think there's actually it was someone else that we've had on office hours that had something that did this.
Yeah, and I do recall that COPS does Spot Fleets, right?
Yes, and I also remember that someone was posting about I think it might have been at a community meeting, someone was talking about doing this.
There we go. Yeah.
It wasn't office hours, it was a community meeting where someone was talking about being able to do Spot Fleet and draining gracefully.
We remember what the answer was.
Googling.
So, okay, we're gonna have to do some investigation on this one. Let's see. I'm looking at one of the initial bug reports for COPS supporting Spot Fleets. Let me see here. So it says we now have EC2 fleets, which supersede Spot Fleets. I'm not sure if we should keep this on. Blah, blah, blah. I have a comment from 7 days ago that might be useful here, and I'm going to plop that in the channel. We'll make sure we get it in the show notes here, and how he's doing this in ECS and then in EKS, and it looks like, but that's for COPS. I don't know if you're doing it by hand, if you could kind of rip off that logic, right? Yeah.
George, we're just looking at your face. You should have shared your screen.
Oh, sorry.
It's all good.
It's okay. I don't have much there. All right. We are running out of time. We maybe have time for one more question. Let's see if we have Kubernetes users. Any questions from the office hours channel? Let's see. Going once, going twice. Audience, how have you liked this session so far? Feel free to give us feedback in the channel if you're having a good time. And about another 15 seconds. So Mario has the new gig. You got a new gig doing Kubernetes on GKE. How you digging that?
Yes, we are slowly going to GKE. We're on AWS right now, actually using StackPoint Cloud, so it's like all abstracted away and kind of good. So StockX is an awesome company that's kind of risen in Detroit here. We're kind of a startup with like 300, 400 people, but it's. I was hired as like senior DevOps guy to come in and say, no developers, don't just push code. Like let's CI/CD this, let's test this. The QA engineers to make sure that process is awesome, and in the midst of it, like all of our stuff is microservices, all exciting, Go, Python, Node, like really easy to work with. And everyone, like I got here and Docker Compose files and Docker files were in every repo, and I'm like, yes. So we are taking things to the next level as a DevOps firm. We're solving a lot of the same challenges that people that asking us questions are. Things like updating secrets live or updating volumes live. Things like auto scaling are huge for us and all that. So
Yeah. So if you're looking for a pair of Jordans, StockX is where I got mine.
Dude, yes.
So
Shoes,
Kubernetes
handbags.
helped get me new sneakers.
I'm not wearing it now, but an Omega watch is going to be happening very soon, and treat myself a little bit. So my birthday's coming up. George.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your expertise.
Yeah,
And with
no
that,
problem.
it looks like we're out of questions.
Hey, George.
Out of time. Yeah, go.
We have like 5 minutes. You guys want to talk about, or you folks want to talk about latest?
Yeah. So, all right. So Jeff, we had a question earlier where someone was using the latest tag, and then Jeff got triggered, and I bite myself with this all the time because I get lazy, and it's like, oh, I'm just at home. I could use latest. Who cares?
I mean, it is a fantastic crutch.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the crutch breaks and you break another bone.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about this here. So what we're talking about is in your deployments, you want the latest version of MySQL, and you say MySQL latest, and then you tell yourself all the stuff's CI'd anyway. Updates will just happen and everything, and then 2 days later, everything breaks.
So multiple reasons why that could break. Thing one is they might automatically push like nightlies to latest, and they're using like a pinned certain version. Another problem is, say you are, dealing with a service, and for some reason the container hasn't been, kicked in the head, or the server hasn't been rebooted. So you're running, say, GitLab 9.5, and it's actually pinned to latest. 6 months later, all of a sudden server reboots, tries to pull GitLab 11. Well, that's not going to go well.
Yeah.
So that's why pinning to latest is usually bad when it comes to any sort of production deployments.
Yeah, and the general advice given to me is always be explicit about everything. Don't just automatically assume leaving stuff off will all kind of always send you the latest, and that's bad.
Version everything, including your infrastructure. That's the whole point of all of this. So also version your own services.
A common thing that we've seen is instead of a version string, it might just be a git commit hash instead. So you definitely know exactly what you're running then.
Yeah. So Dylan says, what if I tag everything latest and version it?
And I say, point to the version still. Because I mean, the way you look at it, this is something that we do. If you push new code live, it builds a new container. The container is tagged with the git commit hash. You're upgrading your infrastructure, your application infrastructure, to that git hash anyways.
Right.
So there's no reason not to really point to latest.
I'm going to share with you all in IRC called Rainbow Deploys by one of our locals here, Brandon Dimchef, who has a really interesting idea on how he versions his deployments.
We should get him on here sometime.
He would be awesome on here, actually.
Did you say IRC? Is there an IRC network?
Sorry, I meant Slack.
Let me log into FNet right now. Let me get my hackery going.
This is IRC with emojis.
Yeah. We mentioned IRC and FTP in the same stream, so that's.
I'm loving this call so much right now. I think I'm gonna launch Steam and play some Doom tonight.
Yeah. So I thought his Rainbow deploys for Kubernetes I thought was very interesting, and it's
very cool. I have not seen in all of the people I've talked to that a reason for you to use different tags on your images that are not in line with your Git commits or Git tags. Like I've seen they'll tag in Git when it's a production ready to release, that kicks off the CI/CD, and then that tag goes with the image, right? And so I actually got asked this week as well, which is a great idea that everyone should be doing, is how do you incorporate the Git commit into the as an environment variable into the image, so that maybe your app can use it if it needs to, or if you need to jump in the container at runtime, you can easily see what version of the app is running, because not a lot of apps are smart enough to have a -- help or even be a CLI based thing, or make it easy for you to see what version it is. And so that's again in your CI process, and that's easy in the Docker file to do, passing your CI process would pass the commit hash into it as a variable. So very cool stuff.
Very clever. So everyone check that out, and I will endeavor to not colon latest as often as possible. And with that, this kind of wraps up our second session of the day, and that wraps up our August Is it August? Yeah, we're in
Yeah, it's
August
August.
session of Kubernetes office hours. Thanks to the following companies for supporting the community with developer volunteers: Giant Swarm, Heptio, StockX, Packet.net, Pusher.com, Red Hat, Weaveworks, VMware, and the University of Michigan. These companies do donate these people's engineering time here for 1 hour a month, and we appreciate that you're able to share your expertise. If you had a really great time, please leave a comment or a thumbs up, subscribe. If you're listening to the live YouTube channel, we do these the third Wednesday of every month. And as always, we are doing questions and things like that. Oh my goodness, I almost forgot. The t-shirts. Who won? Who won the rally?
Ooh, give me a very quick moment. I have to
Okay.
do the math.
Do the math.
Allie.
Here we go.
No, Allie, I.
Oh, Ali, you've won the
Sure,
t-shirt.
Ali.
Excellent. Or Ali, however you pronounce it. It's all good. You've won the t-shirt. I'll go ahead and PM you after this. Congratulations. And wear the shirt proudly. And with that, we are signing off. We will see everyone on the, what's the date? September 19th. And we'll see you all then. Thanks, panelists. And we'll see everyone later.
Later.
See ya.